Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. We'll be going over Leetcode problem number 1141, which is user activity for the past 30 days. We'll be solving this problem in MySQL. So we look at our schema, we'll see that we have a table named activity, and that table contains user ID, session ID, activity date, and activity type. And then we'll look at our prompt. Write an SQL query to find the daily active user count for a period of 30 days ending 2019-07-27 inclusively. A user was active on some day if they made at least one activity on that day. So then we can look at our example table, and this is really just going to help us look about how the data is presented at us visually. And first we can see that the activity date column isn't returned as activity date in our output, which in here it's labeled day. We can take care of that with an as statement, and then active users is just going to be the count of the users that were active on that day. So we have a little starting place, so we can start with our regular format. So we'll do select from where. And then in this case, we're also doing it by date, so we're likely going to be using a group by statement, but we'll get there in a moment. So we'll first start with our select statement with what we're going to name our columns. So activity date becomes day. That's just the date column that's reported. So we're going to select activity date as day. And then we're also wanting to return this active users column, which we're told is just find the daily active user count. So in this case, we'll use the count function. And all the count function is going to do is count the number of times that something happens. And then based on our group by statement, it will do it based on that day in this case. So we'll do count, and then we want to do user ID. But if we do just user ID, if one person is active twice on the same day, for example, user 1, they scroll down to an open session, that person will be reported twice. So what we actually want to do is count distinct user ID. And we're going to rename this column as well as active users. And you see me just using the as statement to rename these columns, and you can really just put anything in here, and that's how it's going to be returned to you in your output. So I just match the case and the format that they have for their column names for the output. And now we'll go to our from. When we only have one table, so this is a pretty easy from. We're just going to do from activity. And then our where statement, working with dates, we want a period of 30 days ending with this date. So there's a function in SQL that we'll be using that works with dates, and this is just the DateDiff function. And the way this works is you put in a date and then you put in another date, and you can limit on how many days that separate them. So with this, we'll just do 2019 0727, and we want to make sure this is quotated. And then you're just going to put for your second argument, and that's just going to be our activity date column, because we want to do it line by line instead of doing a single date. So we can just plug that whole column in. And then we want the difference between those two to be less than 30. So we can just do that mathematically with the less than operator. But this would allow this single line argument here would allow for dates above and below 2019-0727, and not really limit it. So you would get 30 days on each side of that date. So we want to limit that down one more way. And the way we're going to do that is and activity date is less than, and in this case we want to do this date again because we don't want to go because it says ending with this date. So we want to do less than that date. And the only reason why we use less than in this case is, well, we want to do less than or equal to because we want it inclusively. But the reason we do it this way with this less than, and how you know it's a less than, is because you want the dates leading up to this 2019-0727. So that's dates less than 2019-0727, just with how dates work. More recent dates or dates with a later year will be greater than those dates with a lower cumulative date. So if this was 2018, that would also be a less than date. So we're going to do it this way. And then we just want to round this off by putting in a group by function, because that's going to allow all of our code to work together. So we're going to have to do group by activity date. And the reason we're going to group by activity date in this case is because we want to go through and look at each activity date and the users that were active on that date. If we were to do a group by from a different column, it just wouldn't work. So if we grouped by user ID in that case, it would be giving you all the dates that a certain user was active per user, and then it just doesn't make sense to do it by activity type because we're not interested in that column. And then session ID also wouldn't really help us isolate down anything because the session IDs are more correlated to the user ID. So now if we run this code, we'll see that we do answer this correctly, and this is just the most straightforward option for me. And if we go through and look at everything we've done, there's really only one thing that would run correctly that we can change slightly. So if we change this to a less than, it still gives us the correct running here, but this won't work with all test cases because this will exclude this 2019-0727, but we want that to be inclusive. So this would be exclusive, but we want to be inclusive in this case. So we just have to make sure we put that equal to there. And then also, if you run it without this and, what we're going to see is we get dates on both sides. So we only have one test case in this scenario to look at, but this code will not work with other test cases because this will give you on both sides of this date, the 2019-0727, and this test case that we have here just doesn't have dates that are greater than the 27th. So we can't see that in this test case, but in other test cases you will run into that issue. So you do have to have the and activity date is less than or equal to 2019-0727. So this was my approach to Leetcode problem number 1141. If you found this helpful, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you were to approach this problem in a different manner, there are a few other ways that you could approach this problem. Please leave those down in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And I would just like to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one.